The crack of the rifle echoed through the pines like a warning nobody asked for. Ethan froze mid-step on the narrow trail, heart slamming against his ribs, the backpack straps suddenly feeling like iron bands. He had been hiking alone for 3 days, trying to outrun the noise in his head, the same noise that had followed him from Chicago all the way to the Montana Rockies. 28 years old, successful graphic designer on paper, complete mess underneath. And now someone was shooting. Trails closed ahead. A voice called out, low and steady. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who didn't need to raise it to be heard. Ethan turned. A man on horseback blocked the path 20 yards downslope, rifle resting casually across his saddle pommel. Cowboy hat tipped low, denim jacket worn at the elbows, boots scuffed from real work. He looked like he had stepped out of a postcard titled Real America, except his eyes, sharp blue under the brim, were locked on Ethan with something close to concern. Ethan raised both hands slowly. I'm just passing through. Didn't see any signs. The cowboy nudged his horse forward a step. The animal snorted, steam curling from its nostrils in the crisp September air. Signs blew down in last week's storm. Rockslide took out the bridge 2 miles up. Dangerous for anyone who doesn't know the back ways. He studied Ethan's lightweight hiking boots, the slim-fit pants, the expensive backpack. You don't look like the type who knows the back ways. Ethan bristled despite himself. I've got a map. And experience. The man gave a short laugh that held no humor. Map won't help when the ground gives way under you. He swung down from the saddle in one fluid motion, boots hitting dirt. Up close he was taller than Ethan expected, broader across the shoulders. Dust clung to his stubble. Name's Caleb Harlan. I run the spread down in the valley. You're on my grazing lease right now. Ethan lowered his hands. Ethan Morrow. From Chicago. Just taking some time. Caleb's gaze flicked to Ethan's left hand. No ring, then back to his face. Something shifted in his expression. Subtle as a cloud crossing the sun. Time's one thing. Safety's another. You got a campsite set up? Planned to push to the ridge tonight. Not anymore. Caleb jerked his thumb toward the horse. Climb on. I'll take you down to the ranch. Safer route. You can decide tomorrow if you want to keep playing city boy in the backcountry. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. The light was fading fast, and the idea of navigating an unfamiliar trail in the dark suddenly felt less like independence and more like stupidity. He nodded once. Caleb offered a hand. Their palms met, Ethan's soft from keyboard life, Caleb's calloused and warm. The grip lingered half a second longer than necessary. Ethan told himself it was just balance as he swung up behind the saddle. They rode in silence at first, the horse picking sure-footed down a side path Ethan hadn't even noticed. Pine needles muffled the hoofbeats. The air smelled of resin and coming frost. You hike alone a lot? Caleb finally asked. First time in years, Ethan admitted. Needed to clear my head. Head full of what? Ethan hesitated. He hadn't come out here to talk about it. But something about the steady rhythm of the horse, the man in front of him who seemed carved from the same landscape, loosened the knot in his chest. Family stuff, expectations, the usual. Caleb made a non-committal sound. Family can be loud even when they're quiet. Ethan almost laughed. Yeah, that. They reached a clearing where the trail widened. Caleb reined in, letting the horse breathe. My folks still live on the ranch. Dad's got strong opinions about most things. Mom tries to smooth them over. Neither of them ever asked what I wanted. Ethan studied the back of Caleb's neck, the short dark hair curling slightly under the hat brim. And what did you want? Caleb was quiet so long Ethan thought he wouldn't answer. Then, something real. Not just what everyone expects. The words hung between them like smoke. Ethan felt the warmth of Caleb's back inches from his chest, the subtle shift of muscle as the cowboy adjusted the reins. He swallowed. Sounds familiar. They rode on. By the time they reached the Harlan Ranch, night had settled fully. The main house glowed yellow from windows, a porch light welcoming. Caleb dismounted first, offering his hand again. This time Ethan took it deliberately, feeling the rough texture, the strength. Inside, the kitchen smelled of coffee and wood smoke. A woman in her 60s looked up from the stove. Mrs. Harlan, silver hair pinned back, apron dusted with flour. She took one look at Ethan and smiled like she'd been expecting company. "Found another stray, Caleb?" "More like he found trouble," Caleb said, hanging his hat. "Ethan, this is my mother, Ruth." "Mom, Ethan needs a place tonight. Trail's out." Ruth waved a wooden spoon. "Of course. Spare rooms made up." "You hungry?" Ethan realized he was starving. "Yes, ma'am." Dinner was steak, potatoes, green beans from the garden. Ruth asked polite questions about Chicago. Ethan answered carefully, avoiding anything personal. Caleb ate quietly, watching. Afterward, Ruth insisted Ethan take the guest room upstairs. Caleb showed him the way, carrying his pack. The hallway was narrow, family photos lining the walls, black and white shots of stern-faced ancestors, color prints of rodeos, cattle drives. One photo caught Ethan's eye. A younger Caleb, maybe 20, arm around an older man who had to be his father. Both smiling, but something stiff in the posture. Caleb noticed him looking. "Dad passed 4 years ago. Heart attack. Mom still runs the place with me." "I'm sorry." Caleb shrugged. "Life happens." At the guest room door, Caleb set the pack down. Their eyes met. The hallway light cast shadows that made Caleb's face look carved from oak. "Thanks," Ethan said. "For today." Caleb nodded once. "Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow about getting you back on trail, if that's what you want." He turned to go. Ethan spoke before he could stop himself. "What if it's not?" Caleb paused, hand on the banister. "Then we figure something else out." The door clicked shut behind him. Ethan stood there, pulse racing, wondering what exactly he had just started. Morning came with birdsong and the distant lowing of cattle. Ethan woke to sunlight slanting through lace curtains, the smell of bacon drifting up the stairs. For the first time in months, he hadn't dreamed about the fight with his parents, the one where his father had called him disappointing, and his mother had cried without looking at him. The silence after he'd said the words, "I'm gay." Downstairs, Ruth was flipping pancakes. Caleb sat at the table nursing coffee, sleeves rolled to his elbows, forearms corded from years of ranch work. He looked up when Ethan entered, and something in his expression softened. "Sleep okay?" Caleb asked. "Better than expected." Ruth set a plate in front of him. "Eat up. Caleb's got chores, but he can show you around after." Ethan ate while Caleb watched the window, thoughtful. After breakfast, Caleb led him outside. The ranch spread across a wide valley. Barns weathered silver, corrals holding horses that lifted their heads at their approach, mountains rising sharp against blue sky. They walked to the barn. Inside, hay dust floated in shafts of light. Caleb handed Ethan a pitchfork. "You said you had experience." "I mucked stalls once. Summer camp. Age 15. Caleb grinned, the first real one Ethan had seen. "Close enough." They worked side by side. The physical rhythm was soothing. Fork in, toss out, repeat. Sweat beaded on Ethan's forehead despite the cool air. Caleb moved with economical grace, every motion practiced. During a break they sat on hay bales, sharing water from a canteen. Caleb pulled off his hat, ran a hand through damp hair. "You never said why Chicago got too loud." Ethan stared at his boots. "My family, they're traditional. Korean American, church every Sunday. When I told them, it was like I'd confessed to murder. Dad said I was choosing sin over family. Mom just stopped talking to me." Caleb listened without interrupting. "I thought distance would help. Came out here to hike, think. Figure out if I'm the problem." "You're not," Caleb said quietly. Ethan looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because I've spent my whole life trying to be what they wanted. Good son. Good rancher. Straight." The last word dropped like a stone. "Didn't work." Ethan's breath caught. "You're." "Been out to myself since I was 17. Out to Mom for 3 years. She tries. Doesn't always understand, but she tries. Dad never knew. Or maybe he did and never said. The barn felt smaller suddenly. Ethan reached out, hesitant, touched Caleb's wrist. Caleb didn't pull away. I've never told anyone here, Caleb continued. Small town. People talk. Ranching's hard enough without giving them more reasons to drive you out. Ethan nodded. I get that. They sat in silence, the weight of shared secrets settling between them like dust. That afternoon Caleb took him riding, properly this time on a gentle mare named Daisy. They followed fence lines, checked gates. Caleb pointed out landmarks. The ridge where elk gathered in winter, the creek where trout hid under cut banks. Ethan felt something loosen inside him. The constant vigilance, the armor he'd worn so long it had become skin. At sunset, they stopped on a bluff overlooking the valley. The ranch lights twinkled far below like fallen stars. Caleb dismounted, offered his hand. Ethan took it, stayed close when he could have stepped back. I've been alone a long time, Caleb said. Didn't think I'd find someone who understood. Ethan looked into those blue eyes. Me neither. Their first kiss happened there. Slow, careful, tasting of dust and pine and possibility. No rush, no demand. Just two men finally breathing the same air. Days blurred into a rhythm Ethan hadn't known he needed. Mornings helping with chores. Afternoons riding out with Caleb. Evenings on the porch with Ruth, who asked fewer questions and smiled more. Ethan extended his vacation indefinitely. Work could wait. This felt like living. But secrets have weight, and weight eventually shifts. One evening a truck rolled up the drive, dust cloud announcing it before the engine. A man climbed out, mid-40s, starched shirt, pastor collar. Reverend Ellis, pastor of the church in town. Ruth greeted him warmly. Caleb stiffened. Evening, Caleb, Ellis said. Heard you had company. Caleb crossed his arms. Ethan's a friend. From Chicago. Ellis smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Word gets around. Folks wondering why a city boy sticks around so long. Ethan felt heat rise in his face. Caleb stepped slightly in front of him. He's helping out. That's all. Ruth changed the subject, offered coffee. Ellis stayed an hour, talking weather and cattle prices. When he left, the air felt thicker. Later, in the barn, Caleb punched a stall door, hard enough to rattle it. They'll keep coming. Questions. Looks. Then worse. Ethan touched his shoulder. We don't have to hide. Caleb turned. You don't know this place. Last guy who was open lost his lease. Family moved away. Church made sure everyone knew why. Ethan felt a chill. So what do we do? Caleb looked at him, really looked. I don't want to lose this ranch. This Mom's home. My home. The words hurt more than Ethan expected. And me. Caleb cupped his face. I don't want to lose you either. They stood like that, foreheads touching, until the lantern flickered low. The next week brought the first real crack. Ruth found them in the kitchen at dawn. Caleb's hand on Ethan's waist, Ethan's head on Caleb's shoulder. She froze, then smiled sadly. I knew, she said softly. A mother knows. Caleb stepped away. Mom. She raised a hand. I love you, Caleb. Always will. But people talk. And your father's memory. Some folks still come by to pray over the place. Ethan felt like an intruder. I can leave. Ruth looked at him. Don't you dare. Not yet. But the pressure built. Phone calls from town friends asking after the visitor. A church bulletin left on the porch with underlined verses about unnatural affection. Caleb grew quieter, shoulders tight. Ethan watched him break a little more each day. One night after a long ride, they sat by the creek. Moonlight silvered the water. I can't ask you to stay hidden, Ethan said. Not for me. Caleb stared at the current. I can't ask you to leave. Then we're stuck. Caleb turned. Tears glittered in his eyes, the first Ethan had seen. I love you. God help me, I do. Ethan pulled him close. I love you too. But love, they both knew, wasn't always enough when the world refused to bend. The The storm came on a Tuesday, literal and otherwise. Rain hammered the roof all night. By morning the creek had swollen, threatening the lower pasture. Caleb and Ethan worked knee-deep in mud, moving cattle to higher ground. Ruth watched from the porch, worry etched deep. Mid-afternoon, a truck arrived, 2 men this time. Church elders. They spoke to Ruth first, voices low. Then to Caleb. "We've heard things," one said, "about you and the city boy." Caleb wiped mud from his face. "My personal life is my own. Not when it affects the community. The ranch has history here. Your father." "My father is gone," Caleb snapped. "And this is my ranch now." They left with warnings about reputation and example. That night Ruth cried in the kitchen. Not because she disapproved, she said again she loved him, but because she feared losing everything they'd built. Ethan packed his bag quietly. He couldn't be the reason they lost their home. Caleb found him in the guest room. "Don't. I have to. This isn't fair to you or Ruth." Caleb grabbed his wrist. "Running doesn't fix anything. I learned that watching Dad die, pretending everything was fine until it wasn't." Ethan looked at him. "Then fight. But not for me. For you." Caleb's voice cracked. "I don't know how without losing everything." They argued, quiet, fierce, until exhaustion won. They fell asleep tangled together, rain drumming like accusations. Morning brought sun and decision. Caleb called a town meeting, unheard of for the quiet rancher. In the community hall, 30 people gathered. Neighbors, church members, old friends. Caleb stood at the front, hat in hand. Ethan sat in back, heart in throat. "I've been quiet too long," Caleb began. "About who I am. About who I love." He looked straight at Ethan. "Ethan Morrow came here a stranger. He stayed because he saw something worth staying for. I love him. That's the truth." Murmurs rippled. Reverend Ellis stood. "Scripture is clear." "Scripture's also clear about love," Caleb cut in. "About not judging. About grace. I've spent my life trying to be the man everyone wanted. I'm done." Ruth stood beside him. "My son is a good man. He works hard, cares for this land. For me. If you can't accept him, then maybe you should ask why your faith leaves no room for love." Silence fell thick, electric. Some left. Some stayed. A few shook Caleb's hand. Most just looked uncomfortable. Afterward, in the truck back to the ranch, Caleb was shaking. Ethan reached over, laced their fingers. "You okay?" "No," Caleb admitted. "But I'm free." Months passed. Some neighbors kept distance. Others came around slowly, bringing casseroles, offering help with fences. The church split quietly, half clinging to old ways, half searching for new ones. Ruth started a small Bible study focused on compassion. Attendance varied. Ethan moved to a cabin on the property, close enough, separate enough. He worked remotely, designing logos for small businesses while learning ranch life. Caleb taught him to ride properly, rope, read the weather in the clouds. They fought sometimes about money, about fear, about the future, but they always came back together. One spring evening they hiked the trail where they'd met. The rock slide had been cleared. A new bridge spanned the creek. Wildflowers carpeted the slopes. At the bluff, Caleb stopped, pulled a small box from his pocket. A simple silver band, engraved with coordinates of that very spot. "I can't promise it'll be easy," he said. "People will always talk. Some will hate. But I want forever with you, if you'll have me." Ethan slipped the ring on. "Yes." They kissed as the sun sank, painting the mountains gold. Back at the ranch, Ruth waited on the porch. She hugged them both, tears shining. "Your father would be proud," she whispered to Caleb. "He just didn't know how to say it." Years later, the ranch still stood. The town had changed slowly, imperfectly. Younger faces appeared at church asking questions. Ethan and Caleb grew older together, lines around their eyes from laughing, from weathering storms. But sometimes Ethan wondered, was love worth the cost of family, community, certainty? Or was the cost of hiding greater still? What do you think, was Caleb right to choose truth over tradition, even when it broke hearts and changed everything? Or was the price too high?